Thank you, everyone, for coming this morning to our press conference. Today, we are going to be talking about the voter fraud commission that President Trump has created and how that will affect our voters in the state of Georgia. My name is Erica Thomas, and I am the communications chair for the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. And we come together today as a caucus because we have to let our voters know, let our constituents know that their information is very important to us and that we will not allow President Trump to see information that they do not want to be given to President Trump. And we are here to fight against that because that would be a data breach. People need to know that their social security numbers are not being given freely to anyone. That is to be protected by your constituency and to be protected by your representatives and the state of Georgia. I am going to next introduce the chairman of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, Senator Lester Jackson.
Thank you, Representative Thomas. I stand with you, with the members of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, to let you know that every citizen in Georgia, every citizen in America has the right to privacy. Whether that's your social security number, whether that's your birth date and your address. You have that right to vote. You have the right to register as a voter, but you also have the right to have that information private and to give that information to any entity, whether it's government or private, is against our Constitution. It's against our Bill of Rights, but more importantly, it's a fundamental right to have privacy in America. So I stand with the people of Georgia. I stand with members of our Georgia Legislative Black Caucus to say that we have this right for our citizens. Georgia is one of several states that have said that they're not going to give this private information to the commission. But more importantly, I think it's horrible to think that someone in government, someone in Washington, D.C., should ask for this private information. My friends, people of Georgia, the Georgia Black Caucus stand united with the people of Georgia to say no to giving up our privacy, to giving up our rights as Americans, as Georgians. I will now turn this over to our Vice Chair, Representative Sandra Scott.
Good morning. Information shared through our state government should not be accessed by our citizens without written notification from the citizen. Whenever there are issues in the state that cannot be completed for our citizens, for example, Social Security, disability, and immigration, we must receive prior authorization from that citizen in writing. At the federal agencies must also receive prior authorization from the citizen in writing to proceed in assisting the citizen. This method of accessing citizens' files has been safe and effective to everyone. Why would we allow changes to be made to a system that has been working effectively? As of now, there are 44 states that have said no to giving out any information to this commission. I feel like Georgia should also have said no in giving out any information to this commission. Now I will introduce Representative Billy Mitchell.
Glad to be able to stand with my cohorts of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. But let me just state that I believe that this is an issue that transcends the Legislative Black Caucus. I think that every caucus, Republican caucus, rural caucus, every citizen in this state and throughout this country should be really upset about what's going on here. If I may give you a very interesting parallel, it would be as if the government were to say, I suspect that something is going on in your households. I'm going to come in and investigate and just look at the public information. I think that we would, as a nation, would not stand for that, and we should not stand for what is going on with this edict as well. If they only are interested in what is already public information, then go about getting the public information as any ordinary citizen would do. But to call on every Secretary of State in this nation to provide information so that they could use at their whim, so that they could use be based on what their beliefs are, and to do with it what they will without fully disclosing that to the nation, it should be something that every citizen should find abhorrent. I'm glad to stand here, as the Vice Chair has stated, that 44 other states have said we're not giving anything. And I might add that the majority of those states are led by Republican leaders. Glad to be able to applaud them for that. And that's the way we should stand. If you don't have a legitimate purpose, a legitimate court-ordered purpose, this should be something that we all should stand against. Thank you so very much. I'm glad to be able to introduce the treasurer of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, Representative Doreen Carter.
Good morning, thank you. I am glad to be here with you today to call this exactly what it is. This is voter suppression. This is disenfranchisement at its highest. As a Georgia Legislative Black Caucus treasurer and as a body, we stand with Georgians and saying that you are not only violating our privacy, but you are setting up a bad precedent. We have been working extremely hard to ensure that all Georgians have access to voting. What this message that our president has sending out with this commission is saying, I do not want you voting. This is voter intimidation. Our Secretary of State has said that he will only provide information that is public. Well, if it's public, you don't have to supply it. We say stand with Georgians, say no, do not release information, and further, how can we trust that that is what you are going to send out? You inadvertently sent private information that exposed millions of Georgians just a few months ago. So we say no, we say no. I'm going to leave it with that. People of Georgia, you should be speaking louder than ever that our privacy is important. Our vote is sacred, and we will not stand by and allow this Secretary of State, this president, to continue to intimidate voters in the United States, and especially those here in Georgia.
Thank you so much. So in conclusion, we want to make sure that you know together we are standing with Georgians, and we are standing with the voice that we want to make sure that people are encouraged to vote and not discouraged to vote. We don't want people thinking that if they vote, their social security numbers are going to be in cyberspace. And so we want you to know that as Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, we stand together saying that we stand against your information being breached. And so do we have any questions? Okay.
Do you know what the Secretary of State has given to Trump at this time?
At this time, we have been told that the only thing that has been released is information that is already public. No social security numbers have been released. That is what we have been told.
As I understand, there are nearly 40 other states that have given the similar public information out. But we are adamantly against giving out any private information.
Can you talk about, just give a little bit of detail about what truly the fear is? How does this represent voter intimidation in your minds?
Well, we have been hearing from our voters, and I can speak on behalf because we've been hearing this from our voters, and that's why we came today to have this press conference. The main focus of this press conference is to let our voters know that we don't stand behind your social security numbers being sent out, and that's what we're hearing from our voters. People are scared that all of their information is being sent out, and they are discouraged to vote, and we have a huge election in 2018, and we want people to be able to say, yes, I want to vote. Yes, this is something that I've been wanting to do, and I've been doing it every single year. We don't want the numbers to go down in Georgia.
People may stand with you. You say that you want to fight on their
Well, right now we have a lot of things that we are doing on the back end, but as far as to the public right now, what we are doing is standing up for the people. And we're not standing behind closed doors. We want we want to get in front of the people so they say, look, the GLBC is standing with you, is standing in front and standing up for you. That is what we're doing right now.
Any
What
meetings?
legislative action are you taking?
Do you wanna talk about
What
that? 'Cause I don't think we
steps are you taking or planning to take, or have you taken?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. You know, before I go on any further, I kind of liken what the Republican governor of Mississippi said when they asked him for this information. He said they can go jump in the lake before he gives them any information. What are we specifically doing? First of all, we're providing information. We're going to give them the information that they need to be feared over this. I think at this point, with 44 other states saying that we're not giving any or anything that's public, I don't think that there's a private. I don't think there's a legislative remedy that is needed at this point, but be rest assured that the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus would be ready on a moment's notice to do so if it needs to be done. I tell you, one of the greatest fears that I have here is just this so-called commission that is being headed by the vice president. And I might add at this point that the vice president's own state has said they're not participating. It's very interesting to note that this commission has not stated fully what is the purpose of collecting all this data from all the states. I think until we get that clarity, if had this been a bipartisan or a nonpartisan committee, maybe we could have been rested assured. But for one political party, one political office to say, I wish to collect all this information and we're not going to give you all the information on why we need this and what we're going to do for that, should on its face cause alarm with everyone.
Well, actually, they did say on the White House press office website that they're using it for improper voter registrations, improper voting, fraudulent voter registration, fraudulent voting. That's what the purpose is.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that gives me the opportunity to say that is what they said that they would be looking for. What are they going to do once they find it? How are they going to look for it just based on that information? That suggests to me that once they get this information, there are some other steps that they're going to have to take that they did not disclose beforehand. Disclose us to us with it all. If I find you guilty, for instance, of not following campaign laws, we know what the remedy is. We know what the punishment will be. We know what will happen. Here they're saying we're going to look for things, and they haven't told us what they're going to do when they find it or what the remedies are and the like. That should cause suspicion and concern with everyone involved.
So you've named sort of the issue with this being led by, you feel, one party. A similar request came out from the DOJ on the same day. Are you worried about, is it the same issue there?
Are you talking about the DOJ led by the appointed, the Attorney General by the President? I think it's the same administration. You know, I hate to sound awfully political about this, but could you imagine the uproar in this country if 2 or 3 years ago the President Barack Obama said, I wish to collect all this information of every voter? Could you imagine what this would have happened? We probably would have started impeachment proceedings. So, Representative Roger Bruce would like to make some comments.
You had asked about what the concern is. This, for a lot of us, takes us back to the day when African Americans went in to vote and they asked us to count jelly beans in the jar and say how many jelly beans are in this jar before they give you the opportunity to vote. There's no, as was stated already, there's no logical reason for asking for this information if it is already public. The only logical reason that I can think of to ask for is because you want to do something with it to manipulate the information. And so the fact that it's the Republican-dominated government asking for all of this information, and I guess what made me most upset about it is that they wanted to know your voting history, whether you voted as a Democrat or whether you voted as a Republican. Why is that relevant to whether or not there was fraudulent voting? To me, things like that are saying we want to do something with this information to make sure that we have an advantage whenever the next election comes up, and that the other side has a disadvantage. That's the only logical reason I can come up for why they want it. And that's why I wanted to come out today. And we apologize for being late, but we were somewhere else at another press conference. But the bottom line to it is that it's discriminatory. They want the information for false reasons. And again, let's call it the way we see it. So far, this president and this administration has not told the truth about anything. And throughout the entire time that they campaigned, it was one lie after the other. And while I'm not a critic of the press, I think you guys have a job to do. But I don't think you did your job in that case, and that you let this man be elected president without challenging all of these crazy things that he has said, that he's done. And this would be another one. If you don't call it the way it is, this is for a bad purpose. Call it the way it is.
Representative Carter, it sounded like we're not even comfortable with the voter file that doesn't contain social security number, driver's license being released.
Correct. Again, our Secretary of State has said that this is public information. Well, if it's public information, why is he having to release it? The President's office has access to public information. The spirit behind this has caused intimidation. It's his voter disenfranchisement. We have people that are contacting us and are concerned and fearful not only about being able to vote, but what are you really going to do with our information? Again, as Representative Roger Bruce said, you want to check how we voted. Checking how someone has voted, which is private, when it becomes public, is intimidation. And so now you will have people who may be fearful of voting. And this whole administration has operated out of a spirit of fear. And this is what we are seeing in our United States. Instead of us coming together as a people, you seeing us coming further and further apart. And the spirit behind it is fear, and the spirit behind fear is hate. And this is not what we as a people are standing for. So ideologically, it's public. If he gets it, what can he do with that? But the other thing is, because not too long ago, Georgia's Secretary of State released information that was private by mistake.
Is the caucus then asking that even the voter file not be released, or do you?
We think we think that would be in good spirits as Georgia goes forward, as this country goes forward. Remember now, we are one people, we are one state. In fact, we are one country, and this measure is a partisanship measure, and Washington shouldn't be about partisan politics when it comes to voters' rights. This is constitutionally illegal to give up private information. Who wants to do it. Now, the public information, anybody in this country can get access to it, and no one should be able to get it for free or just by asking. We are firm, and you asked the question earlier, what we plan to do about it. And in the next session, this Black Caucus will do a joint resolution to make items such as this illegal, that our state should give up any information to any entity outside of our great state. Georgia, our Secretary of State's office, has the right to look at voter disenfranchisement. Our state can actually look at criminal activities when it comes to election. From election fraud, Georgia can handle that themselves. We don't need the federal government in our business. We've been doing a good job in our state by to looking at criminal activities when it comes to voter empowerment. Let's keep up. Let's encourage people to vote, and let's not have people in fear of, if I should register to vote, maybe my information would go in, would be stolen, or people would look at how I vote, who I vote for, and that information should be kept to the individual, and that information should be private.
Are you expecting Republican support on a resolution like that?
I'm expecting support from people who want to do the right thing for Georgia, and that extends far beyond this Black Caucus.
Do you think that the country's being jerked through all of this because
because Trump wants to verify his delusional belief that millions of dead people voted and millions of immigrants voted, and that's why he lost the popular vote. Are we being jerked for this, for his ego?
We are being led astray. We're being led astray. There have been no evidence of illegal voters, of immigrant voters in Georgia. There's been no evidence of it. There have been no evidence in the past 20 years of dead people voting in Georgia. Now, I can't say what happened in the 50s and 60s, but in the past 20 years, there have been no evidence of dead people voting. There's no evidence of illegal immigrants voting in Georgia. And because the information, it can easily be found out if we have illegal voters. The Secretary of State's office has constantly looked at this issue, and they have not found not one evidence of any illegal activity.
Any other ideas or actions you can think of to monitor and make sure that that information that's already been given to them is going to be used properly that you plan to do?
Well, this caucus stand to work with the Secretary of State's office, stand to work with other entities that want to assure that private information does not go out to anyone, to any entity, whether that entity is a governmental entity or a private entity. We want to make sure that the sanctity of voting and the protection of people's rights and voting rights are protected in this state.
We have one more representative.
Oh, we have one more representative. I'm sorry. I'd like to introduce Ms. Deborah Bazemore, State Representative.
Thank you. I just want to say I totally concur with my colleagues here with everything that has been said. Additionally, my concern is that this president has proven, and it has been proven, that there is no control. So even though we've gotten the reasons he wants this information, who's going to control the fact that it's used for that? No one can control this person. We need to stand for our constituents. We need to let them know that we will not allow this to happen on our watch without us fighting back and without us standing firm and without us going forward to do something about this.
Let me say that when you think about the number of people that have been dropped off of the voter files across the state of Georgia and given this information to the President's Commission, we must think about how are we going to be able to figure out when people call us and say, I'm no longer registered to vote. Did it come from the Secretary of State or did it come from this commission? Because we could have thousands of people deleted from for the voter file and not even know it. So that is more work that our counties, cities, and states will have to do to keep up and to monitor their voters list in each county to make sure that people are not just disappearing from the voters list. Because again, we have no knowledge. We really can't say what they're going to do with the information. And as we go out and register people to vote, we need to make sure that each and every one of them are registered and will be allowed to vote. And now we will have to tell people, make sure you're checking to see whether you are still eligible to vote, because we have no idea what this commission will do with our voters' files. Even though they are public, but they still will have the capabilities to go in and destroy our voter records. So this should be a concern to all, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, to everyone, to make sure that our voter files stay complete and that we have no interference from any outside or governmental force. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So a lot has been said today. So I want to make sure that we conclude that as the GLBC, we stand together with the voters, and we want to make sure it is our purpose and our constitutional right to keep our private information private, and that we want people to go out in drones to vote and not to be scared to go and vote and register to vote. And that is what we want to make sure we conclude. And we also want you to know that we know that all of this that is going on is just a cover up. It's just to disguise what is really going on in the 45th presidency. And so we need to make sure that we stay woke and that we always know what is going on and have our surroundings, because what is really going on is what's behind closed doors. And this is what they want to be in the media. And what needs to be in the media is to encourage people to vote, to make sure that you're registering more people to vote because of this, and that you do your due diligence. And us as legislators will be doing our due diligence to make sure that whatever information is obtained by the 45th presidency will not be interrupting anything that has to do with your everyday things and with voting. Because we stand with people that have fought and bled and died to make sure that you could vote. And so that we will make sure that this information doesn't go anywhere. Okay, we will hope that we can. And we would love to see a bipartisan effort, because we shouldn't be the only one standing here today. Thank you.